Welcome to my Autism Tribe, a community of advocates that are linked by autism but bound by strength. This is a time to find our sounding board and shoulders that help us carry life's load without the fear of criticism. We give and receive. We nurture and empower. I'm your host, Susan Scott. How often do you find yourself saying, "My life is just chaotic"? Will this ever end? Today's guest is a father and autism advocate that has worked tirelessly at not only creating a thriving home environment for his family, but many other families as well. Kyle Jetsel and his wife Shelly are the proud parents of 6 children, 2 of them being on the autism spectrum. He's going to share his story on how his family is actually thriving amidst the chaos. They are coaches, confidants, and they truly understand what it's like to be on the autism roller coaster. Over the past decade, they've developed strategies and techniques that have helped their family lower stress and have been able to get back the family life they wanted. A life filled with joy, happiness, and fun. It hasn't been easy, but they weren't afraid to work at it. Please welcome this inspiring guest, Kyle Jetsel. Kyle, I really just want to take a moment just to thank you so much for just agreeing to be on this podcast. You're such an inspiring person, and we got the chance to talk a little bit yesterday, and I heard your personal story, and I just cannot wait for the listeners to hear your story. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
I think this topic is one that absolutely every single listener can relate to in one way or the other. So why don't you kind of start off by sharing a little bit about your family, who you are, where you are, what you're doing.
Yeah, so my name's Kyle Jetsel, and I'm the happily married for 28 years now, father of 6 kids. My oldest is 25, my oldest 2 are in college, and I have 2 sons in the middle of our family that are on the autism spectrum. Eric is now 20, and Ricky is 17. And I actually have all my kids are boys except for my youngest, who's a girl, and she's a twin, and they're 11 years old. So we've kind of experienced the full gamut of all those kind of things. My 2 sons are at different levels of autism, and I don't. There's a lot of different terms that are used, but for us, I have a son that's at a level 2, which is he needs quite a bit of assistance, but he's minimally, or he can do a few things, and I think he'll be able to accomplish some things that you would normally see in life. But we also have one that's a level 3, which is he requires quite a bit of support and attention, and he is the one that is the most challenging. That's probably the best way to say it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's the 17-year-old?
He's our 20-year-old now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so he's the 20-year-old. So he's the older of our 2 on the spectrum. And, after we had our 2 sons on the spectrum, they were diagnosed, we kind of waited for a couple of years to have more kids. But at that point, we had 4 sons, and my wife came to me and said, "I think we need to try one more time for a girl." and luckily, we had twins. Luckily, one of those was a girl. Otherwise, I would have been really with my wife. So, yeah, so we've got 6 kids. Like I said, just to really... we consider ourselves to be in the top 1% of happy families and happy marriages because of, and I think a lot of that is because of the things that we've learned through raising our kids on the spectrum.
Yeah. You just constantly are learning different things. And some of those things that you have to go through are challenging. And I know that you shared with me a lot of the challenges that you guys faced, when receiving the diagnosis and kind of how you guys were able to move forward. And can you share a little bit about what the diagnosis, how that affected your family and some of the challenges that it brought?
Absolutely, yeah. So, like we talked about a little bit yesterday, the diagnosis for us was quite a bit different, I think, than probably most autism parents. A lot of autism parents, when they first get the diagnosis, it can really shock you and put you in a place that you're uncomfortable with initially. Well, for us, it was quite a bit different. I grew up in a very stressful environment, kind of lower income in a bad neighborhood, and there was a lot of stress around me and in my family as I grew up, and I saw the damage it did to my parents and my brothers and sisters and myself. And so as I grew up, I really wanted to have a family where there was a bubble of happiness over our home, right? And where there was little to no stress, and we really managed things in a way that I could really kind of have that as part of what we classified our family as. So, when I first got married, I chose a wife who, and maybe she chose me. Maybe that's a bad way to say it. But I really wanted to marry someone. I'm kind of a bit of a bulldog, right? Aggressive, ambitious. And so I had certain tendencies that I knew I needed someone who was quite a bit calmer and more relaxed and would really balance me out. So when my wife and I first got married, that's really what I wanted to make sure that we were focused on. And when we had our first two typical sons, we were kind of moving along okay, right? I mean, obviously everybody has challenges, but we had a home where there was a lot of happiness and laughter and joy, and we felt like we were doing okay. And then our third son came along, and at about the age of 2.5, it just felt like all heck broke loose, right? I mean, there was overwhelming craziness and screaming and yelling and throwing of items, and when he didn't get his way, I mean, it was just really a new situation for us, and the stress started to just ramp up, and we realized pretty quickly, initially I guess we thought we had lost all ability to parent. We just thought for some reason, everything we've tried before just is gone.
Right.
And so we were really concerned that about what was going on. And so I remember we were talking to some people. I remember this is about 18 years ago when autism wasn't so prevalent. And so the only thing I knew about autism at that time was maybe the only kind of autism I knew was maybe a child sitting in a wheelchair who was stimming and maybe nonverbal. So for me, it was a brand new thing. And then we had a teacher or a friend who was a teacher say, "Have you ever had him looked at for maybe an autism diagnosis?" And we were a little bit shocked initially, but excited to think that maybe there was a reason for all this stuff. So when we took him in and he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum, I think for us it was kind of we kind of said, "Oh, well, now we know, right?" It was a relief. It was a relief to think that now we knew what it was, and now we could get our family back, right? We could know what to do to start to lower stress and really start to get some of that happiness back. But the problem is it didn't really work that way, right? I mean, we did everything the experts said. We took him to occupational therapy, speech therapies, ABA. We tried everything there absolutely was, from sending his poop off to get tested, right, to see if there was anything at all we could do. And we spent years and thousands of dollars. And this was before really the government kind of accepted that as a diagnosis and would help. So I mean, we were going broke trying to figure this out. But in doing all that stuff, none of it really lowered stress. I mean, there were still, as he grew bigger and stronger, there were still horrible meltdowns. We kind of got caught in this, what we called the autism roller coaster, right? Yeah. I'll never forget one day I worked with him for like 2 or 3 hours, and finally, when my wife Shelly came in, I talked to him and he said, "I love you," to his mom, right? Aww. Some of his first words. And we were like on cloud nine. We thought, this is, I can remember the overwhelming feeling of joy. Yeah. Well, less than a week later, in a fit of rage, he smashed his head through a plate glass window. Oh. And as I was holding him still in an emergency room to get him stitched up, I'm thinking, it was everything that good had happened was gone. Yeah. And all I could think about was how difficult our lives were and how this was going to be difficult for us. And I think really for us, the tipping point, and we struggled. My wife and I's relationships started to fall into disrepair, and my relationship with my 2 older sons started to fall apart because we were kind of walking around on eggshells, afraid of, melting down a 6-year-old, right? We were just so afraid that we didn't do anything anymore. We didn't take him anywhere. If he started melting down, we started pointing fingers at who did this, who did what, and it could have just been a Lego piece that he couldn't find. And so, kind of our tipping point as a family was on a Saturday morning, and we woke up to him screaming like a blood-curdling scream at probably 6:30 a.m. in the morning. And he had the worst meltdown ever. And every time we thought we would get him calmed down, he would ramp back up, and it lasted like 4 hours or something. And I can remember at the end of it, we were so exhausted, my wife and I, and all of our kids were scared to death in their rooms. And we finally got them calmed back down. And then, the worst thing possible could happen. We turned on each other, my wife and I.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who started it or what happened, but, one of us probably said, if you would have just done this instead of that, maybe he wouldn't have. And then, then it becomes a battle of who did what, right? Well, if you wouldn't treat him this way, and, if you wouldn't coddle him, that's what I said to my wife. She said, well, you're too hard on him, right? And all this stuff just boiled over.
Right.
And so, and this fight was a fight that just kept going on. And so, I at some point I thought, this is not stopping. It's just not getting better. So I just walked out the front door, and I had my keys in my pocket. And I remember looking at my car and thinking, you know what? This is not the life I signed up for.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing I can do. I'm leaving, and I'm not coming back.
Yeah, wow.
And I was, when you're put in that situation, there's so much stress. You just don't know what to do. You've tried everything. You feel alone and like you don't have any options.
Yeah.
And at that moment, I remember a lesson my dad had taught me when I was probably 13 or 14. I was playing in a baseball game,
mm-hmm.
and the ball was hit to me, and all I had to do was make one out, and I messed up. And the other team started hitting and scoring, and they won the game, and I felt like I lost the game. So I went to my dad, and I said, you know what, I wish they hadn't hit the ball to me,
mm-hmm.
because then maybe we could have won.
Oh.
And my dad said, you know what, that's not the way we do things, Kyle. We fight. We're going to make mistakes, but we never go down without the biggest fight. If it's important, you do everything you can to resolve and work hard and make things happen for yourself. You control, what happens in your life. And so that lesson kind of hit me square between the eyes at that moment. So I thought, well, what can I do?
Mm-hmm.
And, then I did another thing that my father had taught me, and we have a big pecan tree in our front yard, and we did.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went and kneeled under that pecan tree and just prayed.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew that I shouldn't leave my family. I knew I needed to be there. And, I don't remember what I prayed about or, exactly what happened, but I do remember a real clear feeling that I got that was, you know what, Kyle, the problem isn't your wife, and it's not your son on the spectrum, and it's not your kids. The problem is you.
Mm.
And initially I was just absolutely shocked by this, right? It couldn't be me.
Right.
I mean, I was doing everything. And, but I took that to heart, and I said, you know what, if we're going to solve this problem, and I want to, and we're going to have a happy family, it's up to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, at that moment, I went back inside, and I think my wife might have seen me under that tree.
Yeah.
Because, first thing I did was apologize. I knew I had said and done some things, and I said, I want to fight for our happiness, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes. And I think that was the moment where we realized that the happiness in our family was our responsibility, and we had been passing it off to these other specialists and experts, thinking somehow they were going to fix him or, increase his ability to communicate to a point where, this kind of stuff wouldn't happen anymore. And that was the moment where we decided to craft a plan,
mm-hmm.
to really focus on lowering stress and really enjoying the life that we had. And that was the day, really, that it all changed for us. And it was a slow process, but ultimately that's kind of our story of how we kind of got to where we decided that was it. We couldn't live like this.
Yeah. It's amazing when you have those tipping points and you can look back and say, that was the day, that was the time when the paradigm shift started to happen. And we need those points, actually. They are helpful for us because then it causes us to reflect back at what's not working so that we can revise that, we can edit that to fix, to make it something that is working. And thankfully, you have an incredible wife, Shelly, that's your teammate that you can look to, and she can look to you and say, in every challenge that you have, and say, okay, what are we going to do about it? So what were some of the strategies that you guys started implementing into your family?
That's a great question. I think, and probably what I ought to suggest you here is because I think it's important to note here that at that point in our relationship, she had lost trust in me.
Mm.
And, I thought she was the problem, and she probably thought I was the problem. I would bet if you asked her, she would tell you I was the problem, right?
Yeah.
Because of who I was at that moment. And so it really took a lot of time. I can remember one time I found a strategy that I thought would work, and I shared it with her, and she said, that won't work. That's right. And I was really disappointed. And so I thought, what can I do? I think the strategy will work if she'll help me. And so, what I did was I took it and wrote it out on a piece of paper, and I stuck it in an autism book
Mm-hmm.
it had nothing to do with me. And so I walked over to her, and I opened the autism book, to my sheet of paper that I had written, and she couldn't see that. And I said, hey, Shelly, I found this strategy. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
And when I read it to her, she said, oh, I think that's a great idea. I said, can we do that together, right? And I realized at that point that, and that sounds manipulative, but, she knows about it now. So,
Yeah.
But the idea was that she had lost so much trust in me, she wouldn't listen to anything I said, and I kind of had problems listening to what she said. And so it really, you really have to start at a point where you realize you don't have a lot of trust in each other, because I was the problem. That's what she was thinking. And so it took me a while to build enough trust back up, and until we started to really create some strategies that helped us in our family. And there's a couple of things that really jumped out at me as we started to work and create our own personal curriculum as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And that was this. There was really three key things that we discovered. One was, I don't know about you, but I didn't grow up in a perfect family. Right.
Right. I don't think there is a perfect family out there.
I know, and I came into this thing with certain preconceived notions and things in my past that made me make decisions that may not have been helpful,
Mm-hmm.
right, for my family or for me or for my kids on the spectrum. And so I really had we really had to kind of create this little process we called making your past an asset, right? We kind of had to look at some of the decisions we were making and why,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of realize that some of our past experiences had given us the wrong thought processes.
Right.
And so we had to rethink how we started to move forward. And a lot of that is just looking into what we had done or how we had been taught, and really kind of reformulating, how our past, in some cases, our past can hold us back.
Yeah.
And we kind of had to really take that and kind of flip it so that we learned that our past, if we learn the right lessons from our past, they can propel us forward. So
Exactly.
That was one of the first things we learned. The second thing was what we called, in our program is called Thrive in Chaos, right? It's really easy to talk about what we should do when things get hard.
Mm-hmm.
Not so easy to do it
Right.
when things get hard.
Yes, absolutely.
And so what we had to do was come up with strategies that we could learn that were very easy, that would tip us, triggers that would tip us into the right state, the right mentality when things got escalated, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're just exhausted, and that's when, your buttons are pushed, and you can lose control, and that really doesn't help anything. So
Mm-hmm.
when things got really hard, we realized we had to be at our very best for them. And
Mm-hmm.
so we created strategies that basically, when things started going wrong, we would tip into these states of happiness and joy and patience so that we could get through the difficult moments a lot quicker and really minimize those moments and the stress that we caused as a family.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third thing that really became apparent to us was that we needed hope, right? Anybody can do something for a day or maybe a week or maybe a month, but when you talk about years or decades,
Mm-hmm.
it can be a little hurtful
Right.
to your heart. And so we created what we called creating a compelling future. And we started to create these things that we could see down the road that really gave us hope, and it inspired us to continue to work hard. And ultimately, it was just about really, understanding that we want our kids to fulfill their potential, whatever
Mm-hmm.
that may be. And putting them in an environment that we can do that is just the most valuable, important thing we can do for our kids. And one of the ways we can do that is really to lower stress, to put them in a home where they know they're loved,
Mm-hmm.
and where they feel that love, right? Even when they have meltdowns, or even when they have difficult moments, they need to know that we love them, and they feel that love, and they're going to reach that potential if they feel free to be themselves and accomplish those things.
Yes.
So,
absolutely. Wow. And I think compassion fatigue is a very real thing, because I think that it's really easy to kind of slip back into a dark place when you start dwelling on all of the challenges that are circling you, all of the chaos. You ask yourself, will this ever end, kind of thing. And when you start realizing that there is hope, and there are those rays of sunshine that get through the clouds, maybe not as often as you'd like, but that's what provides the hope. And I know that my son Alex, he knows when there's tension, or, he can feel that. And I think you made a really important note that it's kind of like when things are at their worst is when you need to be at your best. And sometimes that's difficult, but you can do it, and it is worth it.
It really is. I think one of the things that we tend to not do as much as we should is celebrate.
Yeah.
There's scientific proof that if you celebrate, even if there's little small celebrations, that it's going to improve your happiness and your state. And sometimes those celebrations can be as simple as, I'll never forget when we finally potty trained my oldest on the spectrum. He was 9 years old, right? And I'll never forget finally, and I remember my wife and I just celebrating like it was, you would have thought we won the lottery, right?
Yeah.
Because and that was important for us, but also the little things, the little small things that we should let it fill us up, right? And if we can let those little things fill us up on a consistent basis, I think we're going to have much, much more success. I remember when my boys were younger, when they were really good, I used to take them over to the corner gas station and let them buy candy, right? They'd each get their own package of candy. And this was a great treat for them, and they would spend half an hour sifting through every package of candy, right? And it can wear on your patience. I'm like, pick one, right? But no, they got to take their time, right? And so we got up to the front desk and, to check out, and one of my two boys had gummy frogs with marshmallow backs, right?
Yeah.
And the guy behind the counter looked at him and said, "Oh, you got some gummy frogs." And my son screamed at him. I mean, like, "I love gummy frogs." He just screamed in his face. And I think it scared the gentleman behind the counter. But it made me realize how much joy he got from that simple experience.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? If he's going to experience that much joy, I'm going to let it soak me up too, right? I'm going to experience it too. And so, just talking about it now, I'm re-experiencing that feeling.
Yeah.
And it's lifting me. And I think it's important for us to find those moments where we see, because, man, they experience joy like nobody.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, my boys, when they're happy, they are happier than anybody I've ever seen. And sometimes it's as simple as gummy frogs,
Sure.
So I think it's important for us to find those moments and let them fill us, because we're going to need that to be refilled consistently to really, maintain those states that are important to them.
Yeah, that's the fuel, right?
That's the fuel, absolutely.
And something that you had mentioned yesterday when we were speaking briefly is that you and your family have also been using the whole technique of saying, "Oh, this is going to make for a good story." And I thought that was awesome. And can you share with everybody your little story? I think it was one of your sons on a playground.
Yeah, so, I when my son was still in diapers, and he was probably 8, we had an incident at church one Sunday. We were sitting in the chapel, and you could smell him, right? So my wife looked at me with that look like, "I smell it, you smell it, go change him," right? So I'm a good man. So I walked him out, and we went to the bathroom, and those little flip-down trays that you put your children on to change them? Well, they're not designed for 8-year-olds.
Right.
So he's big, and I don't want to break it. I don't want him to fall. There's a lot of bad things that can happen. So I'm really paying attention to how stressed it is. I'm I'm changing him, and he gets to where he fights me. And you know how when you change a newborn and they arch their back, they like weigh 10 times more.
Yeah.
Well, so he's pulling that move, and I'm getting aggravated, and I'm trying to change him, and I'm frustrated, but I'm staying in there. I'm working, I'm sweating him in my church clothes, and I'm all sweaty, and I'm changing him, and I finally get him done, and I walk back in, and as I walk in and I get to the end of the pew, I look at my wife, and I see a kind of a look of horror on her face. And I think, oh no, what happened?
Yeah.
Well, while I was changing him, he had urinated all down the front of my pants leg. And I was wearing khaki pants.
Yeah.
And so I had a foot wide, my one leg was brown.
Yeah.
With urine. And so I remember sitting down just defeated.
Yeah.
I mean, I just thought, what, I just sat there and I was sweaty and it was just horrible experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember a couple days later, I made the mistake of telling my brother this story.
Yeah.
And as I was telling him, he started laughing so hard, right? And I said, it's not funny. And he said, it is funny. Well, the more I told him, the more he laughed, and I found myself laughing too.
Yeah. And
it really kind of surprised me. I thought, you know what? If I'm gonna laugh later at those experiences, and we do when we tell experiences that were difficult later on, generally we smile because we got through them, right? They weren't as bad as we thought they were.
Right.
And I thought, if I'm going to laugh later, why can't I find the joy in it while it's happening? Why can't I see the humor in it? And so I became this guy that would say, instead of, they would do something crazy or wacky in public, I would say, oh no, right?
Yeah.
Instead of that, I would say, you know what, that's going to make a great story. I really started to see the humor in it and the zaniness and how, awkward it was. Mm-hmm. And I started to enjoy that. And I really never realized that it was bleeding over into my other family members until we were at a Burger King playland one day. Mm-hmm. And my two sons on the spectrum were up in the playland. And my son was at the very top. He took his pants off and slid them down the slide without him in it.
Yeah.
And so I see this shadow come down the slide, and it gets to the bottom. It's his pants, and I look at the very top, and he's at the very top, standing up there naked. And my oldest son immediately said, "That's going to make a great story, Dad." And I thought, oh my gosh, right? Instead of being embarrassed or frustrated or angry or saying we got to take him home, we can't take him anywhere, we managed it. My son climbed up in there and put his pants back on, and we as a family, even as other people were staring at us, looking at us like we were bad parents, we were grinning from ear to ear.
Yeah.
And that experience is one now. We've been to Burger King Playland hundreds of times. That's the one we remember with the most happiness and joy in our lives. Oh. And so, really when we take that approach, that it's okay, things happen, and we can see the joy or the wackiness or zaniness and realize that's who they are.
Yeah. And
we should let them feel free to be those people that, and again, he grew out of that, thank goodness, before he got to a certain age. But the idea that it's just so horrific and people are staring, and when we focus on those things, it can bring us down. But when we focus on our kids and their happiness and their joy, it can really lift us, and it can really carry us a long way.
Oh, such a lesson in life, for sure, for everyone. Kyle, I wish I could talk to you for hours on end, and I certainly do want to do follow-ups with you, because I think you are on to something so much greater, and just your stories are so inspiring. And I am going to put all of your follow information in the show notes. So for anyone that's interested in hearing more of Kyle's story, please, look at the show notes and follow him. And just, you're so inspiring. I just can't thank you enough, Kyle. And I am just so proud that you're part of my autism tribe.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been so much fun, and I'd love to come back. And, if there's any way we can help your community, if there's anything we can do, we are, one of the things that my wife and I talked about at one point is really one of the things that makes our heads explode with excitement. Mm-hmm. Is, it's great to have a family that's thriving and living and has lower stress and is really enjoying their lives. But when we see other families start to implement these things, mm-hmm. and we see their happiness, our heads explode with excitement. And so, if there's any way we can share that message or help those families, reach out to us. Let us know. We want to help, and we know that implementing the right things, any family can do it. It doesn't matter the diagnosis. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter if you've got a big family or a small family, if you're a single parent, if you can't get help from your spouse. It doesn't matter. If you can do it personally and you can make a change that starts to bleed into everybody else. So we're here to help. Let us know how we can help.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Kyle, I just wish nothing but the best for you and your family. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate what you're doing. I do want to share one thing with you personally. I heard one of your podcasts. I listened to your podcast, obviously, and I heard one where you said that progress has never been made in history without those voices that spark tidal waves.
Yeah.
And I love that. It really struck a chord with me because, we all have different experiences, and by sharing these experiences, even if they're painful, even if they go against what everybody else says, sharing those experiences can help other people, and that's really how we can make a change for our families and for our kids on the spectrum. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you so much, Susan.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for saying that. I appreciate it. Raising children on the autism spectrum can be really hard. The chaos can sometimes feel overwhelming. Perhaps there are times you feel that your home is like a combat zone, but it doesn't have to be that way. Now is the time to really roll up your sleeves, dig deep, and help your family get a whole new, better life that everyone deserves. We are here for you, for support, love, and encouragement. Thanks for being a part of my autism tribe, and thanks for listening to the inspirational message of Kyle Jetsel. I'll see you next week.